Next type of borrowers. Like loans, borrowers can also be classified into different types. Prime borrowers, subprime borrowers, over leveraged borrower. Prime borrower is smart and good borrower. He is a standard borrower who borrows money and he is paying back correctly. Those borrowers are prime borrowers. Borrowers who have the capacity to repay loan. That means I am taking 1 lakh rupees for the loan and I have to pay 10,000 rupees monthly. I have to pay 10,000 rupees including principal and interest. And my income of a month is 50,000 rupees. If I have 50,000 monthly income, then I can easily pay this 10,000 rupees monthly. Yes or no? Yes. If I have 50,000 monthly income, I can easily pay this 10,000 rupees. If I have 60,000, I can also pay this 10,000 rupees. If I have just 5,000 rupees monthly income, I could not pay this 10,000 rupees. So that is what the difference between prime borrowers and subprime borrowers. Prime borrowers are those persons who have the ability, that means I have the revenue, I have the earnings to repay the loan amount. So prime borrowers are those borrowers who have the capacity to repay loans. Subprime borrowers, exact opposite. Those doesn't have the capacity to repay the loans. Like I said, I took 1 lakh rupees loan and I have to pay 10,000 rupees monthly, but I just have an income of 8,000 rupees or 5,000 rupees, that is lower than the monthly payment that required this loan. So if those persons doesn't have the capacity to repay the loans, those are known as subprime borrowers. Sometimes banks also gives loans to these subprime borrowers because of some malpractices or some mischievous or because of lack of evidence. Banks sometimes give loans to these subprime borrowers. 2008 global financial crisis is also known as subprime crisis. Subprime crisis. 2008 global financial crisis is also known as subprime crisis. Why? This global financial crisis happened mainly because of banks given loans largely to the subprime borrowers who doesn't have the capacity to repay the money, who doesn't have the capacity to repay the loans. Subprime borrowers, banks started to give largely to the subprime borrowers because of some loose banking regulations in America and Western countries. Even those persons with just have 10,000 monthly earnings started to take a large loans of 10 lakh worth rupees, which needs 30,000 or more monthly installments. That was one of the main reasons for subprime crisis. American banks largely given loans to these subprime borrowers because of, like I said, loose banking regulations there. In our country, if we need to take a loan, we have to give enough collateral and security, and we have to ensure our banks that I have the capacity, and we have to produce our monthly earning statements also. So then banks will get confident on our earning capacity. But America, these restrictions are loose. Without any prudent checking on the forms and the certificates that's needed to take a loan, banks started to give loans without proper collaterals. Then these loans gone unpaid because these loans are given to subprime borrowers who doesn't have the capacity. So it's fortunate that it gone unpaid. Then it became NPA. These NPAs mounted in a number of banks. Those banks are very large banks. Then that banks gone collapsed. And collapse of these large industrial banks produced a condition where the amount of credit the industry needs don't getting from these banks because they're going to collapse. So it created a credit problem and financial crisis, and it largely amounted into a global financial crisis. This has also happened in European countries, Western European countries. So it's also affected the world at a large because they are the source of fund flow of the world. So subprime, the credit given to the subprime borrowers, largely credit given to the subprime borrowers is one of the main reasons for global financial crisis in 2008. Over leveraged borrower. If subprime borrowers are those persons or individuals who doesn't have the capacity to repay loans, then over leveraged borrowers are companies who doesn't have the capacity to repay loans. Like in the case of individual, if it is companies who doesn't have the capacity to repay loan, that's what over leveraged borrower. Like if a company have just earnings of 1 crore a month or a year, but they took a loan which needs a payment of 3 crore a year, then it is more than the capacity of that company. So those companies who earn loans which doesn't have the capacity to repay those loans, those companies are known as over leveraged borrower. So in the case of individual, that is subprime borrower, but in the case of companies, that is over leveraged borrower. I think you get the concept. So then zombie lending. What is zombie lending? Lending when a weak bank keeps giving new loans to subprime or over leveraged borrowers. Zombie lending is the process that get into the global financial crisis. Continuously, banks may give because of some mistakes. Banks may give loans to a one subprime borrower, a two subprime borrower, but banks continuously giving loans to this subprime or over leveraged borrowers. What will happen? Banks will collapse. This kind of lending, continuously giving loans to this subprime or over leveraged borrowers, is known as zombie lending. That is known as zombie lending.